favorite Thanksgiving episodes. Just fully leans into the themes I love most from these holiday stories. And it all once again starts with Bob's singular hyper-focus on that Thanksgiving meal. This year, Bob has finally made it to the top of the wait list for what he believes is the best turkey that money can buy.
I'm not driving any faster with a Riverbrook Lake Farms Heritage Turkey in the car list.
Can I just shout out how funny the name Riverbrook Lake Farms is? 3 bodies of water and 1 farm name. Great writing. But once again, Bob's obsessive focus on a Thanksgiving dilemma leads him to really neglect the family that is truly the most important part of the holiday. And even before the dilemma, he's pretty dismissive of Tina's one Thanksgiving plan for the family, the gratitude tree, where everybody writes things they're grateful for on the leaves.
Leaf ceremony?
Yeah, we read our leaves aloud and take turns taping them to the branches.
This sets the stage for what is one of my favorite moments in any of these Thanksgiving episodes, but we'll get there. The major dilemma is forecasted as a very good title this year. The Belcher's gas is out on Thanksgiving and won't be fixed for a couple of days. Perfect timing now that Bob has his never-frozen, top-of-the-line Riverbrook Farms Heritage turkey. And after much panicking and desperation, Bob devises one of his dumbest plans ever. He builds a fire in the alley so he can slowly cook his turkey over it, which he can only do with his family's full help and attention.
Have to keep this bird hot for only 4 or 5 hours.
What? 5 hours? We'll be fully grown women by then!
This silly-ass plan has so many pluses to its. The fire department shows up and tells Bob to put the fire out, and honestly, while I do understand it's their job, they are really rude about it, given that the city messed up their gas and food Thanksgiving. So Bob is fully absorbed anyway, he's 10 tons of this turkey, and he's willing to burn literally anything so he can cook this turkey, forcing the kids to continually retrieve more fuel for the fire. This leads to what I think is a really great moment that showcases Bob's shortcomings in this scenario. The kids go to the park to find more wood, and when there are shockingly few sticks, they put a ton of effort to roll this massive log over to the fire, which obviously is not going to help Bob because it's way too big to burn, but he shows absolutely no appreciation for the effort his kids put forth.
You guys were supposed to get sticks. Where are the sticks?
This is a mega stick! What's happening?
Would you like a suggestion where to stick this log?
Bob's increasing desperation and lack of appreciation for his family's time and help is really what makes this episode big climax hit so well. As Bob desperately tries to keep
Happy Thanksgiving.
his turkey dreams alive,
If you
Tina
celebrate
hands
it.
him one last thing to burn, her gratitude tree.
What the hell am I saying? Oh my god, I've gone nuts, haven't I?
Just a little. Or a lot.
I'm not gonna burn your tree, Tina.
Oh, thank God.
Bob's Thanksgiving tunnel vision is obviously a major motif
How is
across
everyone?
these episodes, but I think this one might be my favorite. Bob is literally willing to burn anything around him to make sure his special turkey is ready for Tea-Day. An apt metaphor for that aforementioned tunnel vision, honestly. And it's not until he almost burns the gratitude tree that he realizes he himself has truly been lacking in gratitude. Oh, and then the fire department...
How is everybody
knocks
doing?
the turkey straight into the fire, burning it to a crisp. And it isn't until Bob verbally acknowledges what is most important that his Thanksgiving wish is actually granted.
I am
Hi.
grateful for all of you, my family.
Aw, family. Huh.
I mean, that one's kind of obvious.
Once Bob goes to throw the turkey out, he peels back the burnt skin and realizes that it is perfectly cooked.
Oh my god, it's delicious.
Get it, get it. Let me try.
It's nice when these episodes wait until the characters have learned their lesson to reward them with the thing they wanted all along. This is a top-tier Thanksgiving episode.
Turkey, I need you beside me.
This is a wildly different Thanksgiving entry for Bob's Burgers, opting for anthology storytelling. The Simpsons is obviously known for doing these on Halloween with their Treehouse of Horrors, but what makes Bob's Burgers anthology stories so special is that they tend to find incredibly unique ways to frame these stories, and also do a great job making the stories feel like an extension of whichever character is telling them. This one kinda nails both, but first it starts by just giving the quickest and most efficient plot-establishing dialogue ever.
Oh, by the way, Gene has the stomach flu and he's barfing and has crazy diarrhea, so he's spending Thanksgiving in the apartment bathroom, and we all have to use the bathroom in the restaurant.
I also think giving Gene the focus for this Thanksgiving episode is a really nice change of pace that I'm surprised we didn't see happen sooner, considering how much that kid adores food. Being too sick to eat Bob's Thanksgiving spread is a fate worse than death for Gene. In fact, he even serenades his family about it.
Lighting in your
Thank you guys for the lights.
Something for my heart and soul.
I have got to give Eugene Merman props for the singing performance here. Gene sings a lot in the show, but
Thank you for the
this song
sub.
in particular, you can really hear how damn sad he is through his vocals. Really impressive and a really great Thanksgiving conflict for Gene. But this also works really well with Bob's Thanksgiving obsession, showing that he maybe took Gene for granted when nobody else in the family is particularly jazzed about his quote-unquote innovative menu stuff.
I really wish Gene wasn't sick. He was so excited about all this new food.
So the framing device for the anthology stories here is that Louise and Tina are trying to tell Gene stories that will make him hate food, so he isn't so bummed about missing out on Thanksgiving dinner. And they do this by basically combining food with old action movies, in what I can really only describe as an excuse to make the sweatiest food puns, which, let's be honest, is Bob's Burgers' entire MO. So this track, Louise starts off with a parody of
I'm,
which is of course called
watching
The Bread
YouTube
Bread,
and
where
playing
Bob turns the
video
predator
games and
made out of
editing
bread,
at the
also
moment.
turns his victims into bread. It's incredibly silly, but pretty funny. I particularly love the detail that the Predator's butt is made out of hot prompt pen as this does. Tina's sweaty action movie pun is Air Force One, a parody of Air Force One, where a group of bears hijack the president's plane. But I'm gonna be honest, there was a huge missed opportunity here to call these air terrorists airlift. This one had some of my biggest laughs in the entire episode too, like when President Gene was worried he wouldn't be able to watch the Kaminsky Method on his flight.
Of course, sir. We have all the episodes streaming on VHS because it's 1997.
This story also has Gene insisting that his wife in the story needs to be Linda, which is very weird, but also very Gene. He really loves his mom. I do think that the highlight of the episode is how the last story ties everything to the story of the framing device. Bob realizes that Gene ate this 2-week-old chicken parm in the fridge, so he doesn't have stomach flu, he has food poisoning. And he wrote his action movie parody entirely around this, Parmageddon.
We need to go up there and blow up that big piece of chicken parm.
Basically the plot of Armageddon, but instead of Bruce Willis sacrificing himself to blow up the asteroid, Gene has to eat an old chicken parm the size of Texas. It's a nice way for Bob to reveal to Gene that he knows what happened, and Gene fesses up.
I was embarrassed that I basically ate garbage. I just love to eat.
Bob's Burgers is generally pretty impressive with its anthology stories, but they still to me are usually among my least favorite episodes, mostly just due to personal taste. And even though this one did a great job delivering an emotional character-focused story through these action food movie parodies, it's a bit lower on my Bob's Giving favorites list. But I think that really just speaks to how great these episodes are, because it still delivered some really lovely family moments.
As soon as you pass that sip test, I'll eat dinner with you.
Amazon Black Friday week is here. With deals up to 40% off.
In the tradition of finding new locations for their Thanksgiving specials, this year the Belchers go to volunteer at the old folks' home before preparing their own Thanksgiving meal, which is a pretty fun setting for a holiday. And miraculously, Bob is given the opportunity to prepare Thanksgiving dinner for the entire home when their chef goes into labor, which might sound like a nightmare surprise for most, but this is Bob we're talking about.
Hi, Kitchen. I'm Bob. Let's get into it. No, that sounded lame. Sorry, Kitchen.
That's okay.
I love how they started to expand Bob's talking as the turkey compulsion beyond the turkey itself. In this one, he talks as the kitchen and also a whole array of side dishes. But this episode splits the family into 3 groups. Linda gets stuck with Sergeant Bosco and his mother, which I have to admit is kind of the odd story out. It has some funny moments, but it's pretty thin, and I think
You're
it was
welcome and
mostly
happy
meant
Thanksgiving to you
separate Linda
too.
from Bob. Tina, Gene, and Louise plan to help Zeke put on an in-person Thanksgiving Day parade for the folks at the home since their cable has gone out, but Louise gets roped into helping Bob prepare the food, which is honestly such a perfect circumstance to build familial conflict on Thanksgiving, given Bob's hyper-obsessive food tendencies on Tea Day. Bob and Louise have a really fun dynamic that creates great conflict, because they're both a little bit controlling in different ways. Obviously this comes out of Bob most for Thanksgiving food preparation, but Louise in general doesn't like to be in situations she doesn't have much control over, which makes her sous chef position really difficult. However, Louise does pretty immediately find something she's stoked to do in the kitchen.
It shoots fire when you press this button.
Let me see, let me
What are you
see, let
doing,
me see.
buddy?
Louise basically immediately falls in line when the prospect of torching the marshmallow on the sweet potato casserole is put in front of her. Unfortunately, Bob's Tea Day tendencies prevent him from being a good teacher, and anytime Louise struggles to do something in the kitchen efficiently, rather than show her a better way, he takes over and just does it for her. Again, I just think this is a perfect way to build conflict between Bob and Louise, who generally have a great relationship, but their personalities still have tendencies tendencies that clash pretty substantially. And I'm sure you could guess what exactly brought this food-based conflict to its boiling point.
Captain Casserole reporting for duty.
Oh, it's just that we only get one shot at this, Louise, and if we don't get it right, it's ruined.
I do think that while I love this A story with Bob and Louise, which sets up a perfect familial conflict within a great Thanksgiving scenario, the whole IRL parade B story is maybe a little lacking. It has some pretty funny moments, like Tina play acting as a reporter before the parade, and I love Zeke getting more involved in any story, but it definitely feels like it was lacking impact in the narrative. Even in how they tried to sort of merge the A and B stories with Bob's apology, but admittedly, even though it felt like a haphazard combination of these sides of the plot, Bob's apology to Louise is a great moment.
I pictured us bustling around in there, high-fiving with spatulas, but I was way too much of a cook and not enough of a dad.
Man, that is just an all-time great Bob apology. What a good line. I've got to do a video about Bob and Louise's relationship one day, and Bob really makes up for his blunder with this final beat.
Hey, Louise, there's one more thing I need your help with in the kitchen.
What's that?
I'm only slightly torn on this episode because it pairs a B story I'm mostly indifferent to with one of my all-time favorite A stories, but man, that A story is truly special.
3, 2, 1, roll! With just one goal!
We have reached the final Bob's Giving entry, at least for now, Season 13's Putz Giving. While this is a very good episode, I do think it maybe strays a bit too far from the Thanksgiving of it all, but it's still great. In this one, Tina is trying to figure out how to ask her parents if she can go to Tammy's bonfire where high school boys will be in attendance. But while trying to bring this up, the family decides to go on an impromptu Thanksgiving Day mini-golf excursion so they can take advantage of an expiring coupon.
This is my new home.
I love the way this episode is structured, basically having Tina bounce between the A and B stories, acting as the bridge that connects everything. On one side, Louise and Jean are desperately trying to get their golf balls in 3 holes simultaneously to make this mini golf Yeti's head, arms, and legs all move at the same time. I think what I love about this side of the story is that it is such a kid thing to want to see. It's so inconsequential, but kids are often obsessed with inconsequential stuff like this. And that's what makes the conflict with Tina work so well. As the elder Belcher, Tina has her eyes set on something that is pointedly more grown up in this episode, going to a bonfire where older kids will be hanging out. While the whole Yeti scheme might have seemed fun to her in any other circumstance, today it feels meaningless and not worth risking getting into trouble as she's trying to stay on Bob and Linda's good side. It's just such a great age-based conflict for the Belcher kids. Of course, Tina's pleas to her parents generally go ignored because that entire B story is focused on Linda chasing the hole-in-one dragon. This B story itself is actually also inconsequential, but it is just so funny. They start off by showing Linda brushing off her own terrible golf skills, faking her score.
I don't think you did, but fine.
No, I did.
And then when she miraculously gets a hole-in-one, she obsessively tries to get another and has a miserable time because of it. It's incredibly silly, but it's vintage Bob and Linda, with Linda just flying off the rails and Bob putting up with it in a dry but funny way.
Yeah, Tommy Two-Stroke. Get ready for Linda. Look at my hole-in-one.
Just as long as you don't permanently change your name to that.
But where this episode really shines is in
Where'd you
Tina's
go?
relationship to Louise and Gina, which is obviously going to continue to shift and change as she gets older, but she'll never throw her siblings under the bus. After the pair actually breaks the Yeti, Tina still comes up with a last-ditch plan to fix it for them, putting her own desires at risk for her sister. It's a really great sentiment, and while it works for a moment and they have a chance to get off scot-free, Louise actually decides to come clean. It's a really nice resolution where Louise grows up a little bit, and then Tina recognizes that she would never want to ruin her relationship with her siblings.
Gina and I shouldn't have been messing with the
It
legs.
was an accident, and it could have happened anyway. I mean, Dancing Yeti is a lot of moving parts. Lots that can go wrong.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Oh, chill,
So
chill,
while
chill,
I
chill,
do think
chill,
this
chill,
is just generally a really great episode, with classic Bob and Linda shenanigans and a heartfelt, impactful Tina and Louise story, I do maybe get a little stuck on the fact that it doesn't really feel like it needed to be a Thanksgiving episode. The fact that it takes place on Thanksgiving barely factors in at all, outside of Bob trying to get home to cook, and it honestly feels like they could have just written this for any other time of the year. So as a Thanksgiving episode, I sort of dock it a few points, but as a Bob's Burgers episode in general, there's almost nothing to complain about. It's funny, it's heartfelt, and it ends with one of my favorite Tina and Louise moments in the entire show.
Louise, I know we're not always going to want to do the same things, but I'll always have your back.
Same here.
So there it is, all 11 Bob's Burgers Thanksgiving episodes so far. These are fan favorites for a reason. As I mentioned,
I didn't say it, dude. You come out here. Stop looking at me like, yeah, we want that. Hi. Are you a happy boy? She's getting that bud.
So no, actually I'm getting the butts.
With the most recent release of FNAF Into the Pit, I found it kind of difficult to make a theory about the game as it seems much more suitable for a theory discussion. It doesn't really hammer home any given point, only really having a bunch of references to different areas of the series, and so a lot of small pieces of evidence for theories. But since it's a new FNAF game, we got a new FNAF game protagonist. So what I thought it would be cool to do is make a theory talking about the identities of every FNAF protagonist. Obviously some of these are much easier to solve than others, especially Into the Pit itself, since we're just given the identity,
Hello.
but some games like FNAF 2, 3, and 4 have much more debate surrounding their protagonists, so in this video we'll be going over the protagonists of each FNAF game, excluding stuff like the spin-offs and the Fanverse games, though I will talk about FNAF World. I won't go completely in order because some things are easier to explain out of order, but only really like once or twice. So, without further ado, let's get started. In the very first Five Nights at Freddy's game, our paycheck says that our name is Mike Schmidt. Knowing that there's another character named Mike in the series creates an instant connection between Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton. In the FNAF movie, Mike Schmidt is the protagonist, the guard at Freddy's like he is in FNAF 1. However, it's unclear whether or not Mike actually is the long-lost son of William Afton. Regardless, Mike's family does align perfectly with the family of Michael Afton in the games. The Afton mother is indicated to die in the games, and Mike's mom dies in the movies. Michael Afton also has a younger sister who becomes Circus Baby, and Mike in the movie has a younger sister who almost gets spring-locked inside an Ella costume. And Ella in the books is actually an early Charlie Bot, and the latest Charlie Bot turned out to be Circus Baby. And finally, Mike has a younger brother who dies, and because he was the one who was supposed to keep him safe, he feels like his brother's death is his fault. And the same happens with Michael in the games. Whether Mike in the movie is an Afton or not, he very clearly seems to be the Michael Afton equivalent, indicating Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are the same person in the games. Something else worth noting is that the survival logbook is owned by someone named Mike. Throughout the book, Mike makes constant references to FNAF 1, but he also references Sister Location, which indicates the protagonist of FNAF 1 is the same person we play as in Sister Location, which was actually the introduction of the concept of Michael Afton. Pen unit has the name Mike taped onto it, and at the end of the game, the player says his name is Michael, and called William Afton his father, making the player Sister Location Michael Afton. And if we play as Michael Afton in Sister Location, then the logbook indicates that we also play as him in FNAF 1. But what's most interesting about Mike are the reasons he gets fired as well as his last name. See, in FNAF 2, there's two protagonists, Jeremy Fitzgerald and Fritz Smith. Jeremy may or may not be someone specific, like one of the FNAF 4 bullies, but to the story of FNAF 2 itself, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. However, I want to focus on Fritz. On Night 7, Fritz gets fired for the exact same reasons that Mike does in FNAF 1, tampering with the animatronics and odor. What's more is that the names Smith and Schmidt, the last names of Fritz and Mike, are the same name. Schmidt is actually the German equivalent of the English name Smith. This implies that Mike Schmidt and Fritz Smith actually are the same person, someone who has a reason to keep coming back to Freddy's. And if Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton, Fritz Smith is as well. What's more though, is the story what we found. Hudson in the story has a mother who dies and a stepfather who is just the worst person ever, which aside from the stepfather part, matches with Michael Afton pretty well. When Springtrap appears in Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction, where Hudson is the security guard, he ends up getting agony-induced hallucinations, ones pertaining to his past. In FNAF 3, the protagonist also gets agony-induced hallucinations in the form of the Phantom animatronics. By the logic what we found provides, those phantoms are likely part of the protagonist's past. Since the phantoms are hallucinations of animatronics from FNAF 1 and 2, the player of FNAF 3 has to be the same person we play as in FNAF 1 and 2. If the protagonist is so persistent over the course of 30 years, they have to have a connection to Freddy's. And disregarding how we've already established the player of the first two games to be Mike Afton, it being the same person indicates an immense amount of persistence which matches with Michael Afton. And like I said, if we play as Mike in the first two games, that means we also play as him in the third too. But it doesn't end there. We play as Michael again in FNAF 4. The bite victim was believed to be the protagonist of FNAF 4 for the longest time, and even still, so many people believe that to be the case, mostly because we play as him in the minigames, and because of the game claiming we play as a child. Plus, there's also the Easter egg of flowers, pills, and an IV drip. However, this doesn't make sense. First of all, throughout all of FNAF, the 8-bit minigames have always been things that happened prior to the events of the actual game. If the bite victim was one of the experiment victims prior to the minigames, that wouldn't work, because the minigames wouldn't be in the past, they would be in the future. It also wouldn't add up because the flowers, pills, and IV drip wouldn't have anything to do with the bite victim if the bite hadn't already happened. The nightmares also couldn't be in the bite victim's coma, because he's only in that coma for 1 day, not spanning 7 or even 8. Plus, the nightmares keep going even after the bite victim dies. Theoretically, he could still be able to dream as a spirit. He's asked in the logbook if he has dreams, which indicates he did go through the nightmares at some point, and the question is present tense, so maybe he still is. However, that's not very satisfying, because on that very page, there is a drawing of Nightmare Fredbear, but it is drawn by Mike, meaning Michael Afton also went through the nightmares. But how do we know he's the actual protagonist? Well, it's something we hear in FNAF 4 itself. It's a distorted and reversed version of the FNAF 1 Night 1 phone call. Back in the days of FNAF 4, Scott made a post talking about how people hadn't solved the story of FNAF 4. He claimed that people probably assumed he filled the game with random Easter eggs, but that he hadn't. The Easter eggs and tidbits you can find throughout the game actually mean stuff. What that means is that the FNAF 1 phone call in the nightmares is actually there. The player is actually hearing it. That means the nightmares happen after the events of FNAF 1, and that the player of FNAF 1 and FNAF 4 is the same person. If Mike Schmidt was a random person, there's no reason he would be the player of FNAF 4. Regardless, as we've already established, Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton, and therefore the player of FNAF 4 is too. And if you think about it, the flowers, pills, and IV drip make a lot of sense if the player is Michael, as it would be him going through the nightmares because of what he did to his brother. And it would make sense if the bite victim was actually inflicting the nightmares onto Michael. That's why we're supposedly playing as a child, because Michael is going through the experiments that the bite victim already went through. Moving
500 deluxe garden gnomes. Sign here, please.
But I only wanted 5. There's not enough money in my account. I'm gonna get charged.
You know, your BMO Smart Advantage checking account gives you an extra day to avoid an overdraft fee.
Good to know. So you don't like gnomes, huh?
I mean, this one's okay. I always wanted a sidekick.
Moving on now, we're finally at a game where we don't play as Michael Afton, though it will be short-lived. FNAF World. While FNAF World doesn't seem to be literal, it is still a very important game in the series, and it is a representation of actual canon events, namely the creation of the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. FNAF World is all about the puppet enlisting the help of Adventure Freddy, our protagonist, to set up the pieces of the Happiest Day minigame for the bite victim to eventually put together. The puppet, who in the game takes the form of the Glitch Bear, tells us that we were created specifically for the purpose of setting up Happiest Day. There's 2 ideas I can see for this. In the 7th Phasma Fright epilogue, Larson hears whispers coming from the evidence bag from the FNAF 6 fire, and inside this bag is the puppet. In the FNAF AR Remnant segments, whisper sounds are emitted from the Dark Remnant, which summons Shadow Bonnie. The puppet and Shadow Bonnie both emit whisper sounds. Now, this isn't damning evidence on its own. There's no doubt in my mind that other spirits and paranormal entities in FNAF can whisper, but it's not this alone that makes me think these 2 have a connection. There's also the fact that Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy both first appear in FNAF 2, the first game the puppet appears in. Shadow Freddy is established to be an entity made from Afton's evil, so it would make sense if he was made from Afton's fury and killing Charlotte. Meanwhile, Shadow Bonnie is one of the characters we see in FNAF 3 setting up the Happiest Day minigame. While yes, there's other animatronics doing that, and it's not literally those characters doing it, Shadow Bonnie cycles through the levels, and most importantly, through the glitches, as if he's in control here, and in FNAF World, we, as Adventure Freddy, travel through the glitches in order to set up Happiest Day. It would make sense if maybe Shadow Bonnie was created by Charlotte's agony in her death, and he was specifically used to help set up Happiest Day. While not specifically created for that purpose, as the line from FNAF World would suggest, it would provide some explanation for that line that makes sense if FNAF World isn't actually literal. Also, while not the most damning piece of evidence by any means, it's worth noting that Shadow Bonnie in FNAF 3 is named RWQFSFASXC, and that was specifically for that version of Shadow Bonnie, not the version we see in FNAF 2, the version in the minigames that sets up Happiest Day. Then in FNAF World, Shadow Bonnie is named RWQFSFASXC again, or RXQ, and one of his moves in the game is gift boxes, and the puppet in FNAF 2 gives gifts to the missing kids before giving them life, which is also what the gift boxes do in FNAF World, give you a second life. Again, not the best evidence, but still worth noting. So do we play as Shadow Bonnie in FNAF World? It would definitely make sense, and I could definitely see it. But what would be weird about that is how one of the clock minigames in FNAF World is us putting Shadow Bonnie in place for his minigame from FNAF 3, which doesn't make much sense if we ourselves are Shadow Bonnie. Alternatively, that line I mentioned earlier about us being created specifically for setting up Happiest Day might be exclusively for the game, and instead we could be playing as an actual spirit. While Adventure Freddy is the protagonist of this game, it isn't literal, so instead, I think the player might actually be Cassidy. Why? In the final cutscene of Ultimate Custom Night, we see Golden Freddy, Cassidy, fading away into the darkness. This, along with the Old Man Consequences minigame, caused a lot of people to assume that Cassidy is the one you should not have killed in Ultimate Custom Night. I won't go in depth into why I don't think that is the case in this video, because I plan on doing a video in the future all about Andrew where I will discuss that topic. However, that Old Man Consequences minigame there is Golden Freddy, Cassidy, regardless. Going back to FNAF World, we have the same minigame, same setting, same characters, same pond. You can still talk to Old Man Consequences, and you can still go into the pond. All that's different is what happens when you go into the pond, and the dialogue from Old Man Consequences. But if everything else is the same, it would make sense if that bear was the same person in both minigames. If that bear is Cassidy in Ultimate Custom Night, that bear is likely also Cassidy in FNAF World. That
I like it. It's mine. The prices blow my mind. I feel so rich. I feel like a billionaire. I'm shopping like a billionaire.
That indicates that we play as Cassidy in the rest of FNAF World. The idea here is basically that after Afton kills the missing kids, they possess the animatronics, and something happens to the Bite Victim's soul, so the puppet wants to make sure that he doesn't possess an animatronic too, so she'll put him back together. And so she enlists the help of Cassidy to help set up Happiest Day to set the Bite Victim free. Personally, I don't know which of these options works better, because there's a lot that adds up with both, but a couple things that make me skeptical of both as well. In reality, we might not be playing as anyone in particular, but I think if we play as Shadow Bonnie or Cassidy, it can very well make sense. But I'll leave it up to you guys to decide which one makes the most sense to you, because I'm not really sure. And it's also possible, like I said, that we don't play as anyone, and that's also a valid option. Since we've already covered Sister Location, the next game to talk about is Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, aka FNAF 6. And once again, we play as Michael Afton. The main reason this is so easy to figure out is just the nature of FNAF 6 as a game. It's the grand finale of the series, and so it is all about getting rid of everything that is left. Since Michael is still alive, he has to be a part of this. In Henry's speech, he claims that our protagonist is not who this job was for, but that we probably wanted to be here. If we were just a random person, there is absolutely no reason we would want to die in this fire, so us playing as Michael is undeniable. The player of Ultimate Custom Night is also pretty easy to figure out. We're constantly told by characters like Jacko Chica and Nightmare Jan that we are living in a nightmare and burning forever, which aligns with what Henry tells William Afton at the end of FNAF 6. The game is someone being tortured by the one you should not have killed, which is a very interesting name to give, because it implies that our character has killed more than one person, but that this specific spirit is special, which rules out Mike being the protagonist as he only killed one person. In the Fazbear Frights books, it is basically confirmed that the player of Ultimate Custom Night is in fact William Afton, as the man in room 1280, Andrew's killer, is a burned man, matching what happens to Afton in FNAF 6, although that also matches Michael. But in the story, they're tortured in nightmares before attaching to Andrew and being officially revealed to be William Afton himself in the second epilogue. The Man in Room 1280 story is essentially Ultimate Custom Night, but from the perspective of the outside world, meaning Afton is in fact the player of that game. Moving on now, let's discuss FNAF VR Help Wanted. There's two options for this one, though I think one is stronger than the other. In the Curse of Dreadbeard Corn Maze minigame, we can make it to the cellar and find the Vanny Mask. With FNAF 8, into the game systems to play the game early, the currently corrupted version of the game. Through the Patient 46 tape, as well as GGY, we learn that Gregory is a hacker and is also possessed by Glitchtrap. So, it's entirely possible that Gregory actually hacked into the Fazbear systems to play the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience early and ended up getting corrupted by Glitchtrap, meaning we play as him in FNAF VR after Vanessa has already been corrupted, and when we find the Vanny mask, we just hear what Vanessa's conversation with Glitchtrap was like, but only in Vanessa's side. That seems like a very likely option for how Gregory got infected with Glitchtrap, but it could also just happen off-screen. Us being short in FNAF VR is likely just a feature to make us more vulnerable. I mean, that's literally the entire point of the hard mode plush trap game where we're made even smaller. But I think the most damning piece of evidence that we play as Vanessa relates to the mask. When we play Corn Maze and put on the mask, we hear heavy breathing. But then once the mask is on, the breathing starts to slow down. We are calming down. With this mask on, our character feels safe, and that very heavily indicates that the mask belongs to us. Playing as Gregory is a cool idea, and I think it is possible, but I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's the most likely option. Instead, I think we simply play as Vanessa. Next up, FNAF AR. I think this one is pretty cut and dry. We don't really play as anyone, we're just a random person. Now, older FNAF AR file messages indicate that maybe we could have originally played as Edwin in FNAF AR, but if that was ever the case, it definitely isn't now. With the Storyteller, we see Edwin's full story from before he even found out the Mimic was at play. In those file messages, the player seems to already know what the Mimic is, but in the Storyteller, there's never any indication of the Fazbear front-end service existing yet, let alone Edwin getting it, and he dies at the end of the story before he gets the chance to. So we definitely don't play as Edwin. Tales was apparently written in, 2019, which is the year FNAF AR came out, so it wouldn't surprise me if some plans just got slightly altered. Now, it is possible that we do play as someone specific, because the Fazbear Funtime service is meant to last 24 hours, and ours glitches out and lasts 999 years. I think that's just for gameplay purposes, so we as people in real life don't think we can play the game for only a day, and I do doubt that we are a specific person, but maybe we're someone. Maybe we're Michael Afton if he's alive. Maybe we're Vanessa. Maybe we're Gregory or Cassie's dad. Maybe we're a robot. Would explain how our vision glitches, but Gregory's does too. And is he a robot?
Maybe you've seen them in schools, in the community. You may have seen them talking and laughing, and coaching and supporting. But when you see them, do you see you?
Zale's Black Friday specials are here, and only in limited quantities, with up to 50% off. Find something for everyone on your holiday list, including the most...
Yeah, don't answer that. There's nothing to talk about with Security Breach and Ruin. We simply play as Gregory and Cassie respectively. There's no reason to talk evidence proving that when it's blatantly stated numerous times. So, let's move on and talk about Help Wanted 2. In Help Wanted 2, we play as an adult who is working to try to get a job at the Pizzaplex as pretty much the only human employee left. At the end of every round of Fazerblast, Carney claims that this game is fun for the whole family and that we look like we have children, which heavily implies that the character we play as is a parent. At the end of the game, when playing Princess Quest 4, we swap characters, no longer playing as the princess and instead switching to playing as our protagonist from the rest of the game. There's a set of 6 graves with torches that we have to light up, and if we light them in a very specific order of Chica, Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, Golden Freddy, the puppet, an area in the ground opens up, revealing a chest, and inside this chest is a Bonnie mask. When we collect it, we get an achievement called Lost Luggage, and the player remarks that the Bonnie mask looks familiar. The Ruin DLC went out of its way to talk about Cassie's dad, and how he has a Fazwrench, and how his favorite character was Bonnie, and that he used to collect Freddy and Friends lunchboxes. He was mentioned enough times that it was definitely notable and interesting. Since his favorite character is Bonnie, is it a coincidence that the Bonnie mask looks familiar to him? We know Cassie's dad worked at the Pizzaplex and used a Fazwrench just like our player character in Help Wanted 2. In the game, we use the Fazwrench to actually unlock Princess Quest 4, which is where we find the Bonnie mask in the first place. Our character seeming to have kids also adds up, as of course he has Cassie. Also, the fact that specifically a Bonnie mask is familiar to us could indicate that Cassie's dad is the Bonnie bully from FNAF 4, who also wore a Bonnie mask. That would also explain what is special about Cassie's dad. He was the Bonnie bully. He was partially responsible for the fight of '83. He was there from the very beginning. And finally, that brings us to Into the Pit. And of course, we know that we play as Oswald, and those are the protagonists of all the FNAF games. I'm not quite sure where we're going to be going with Secret of the Mimic, whether it'll be Edwin somehow, or someone else we know, or someone brand new. But I guess we'll find out next year. Also, I do apologize for being late on my week before video. I've just gotten really distracted away from reading the book, so it's taken longer for me to make that video than I thought.
You want it? Go get it? You don't have a blanket on my list.
You still awake, Timmy, or did you go to sleep? You want some M&Ms? You want some M&Ms? Okay, what's left of this? There's maybe like 10 in there. If you want them, they're peanut butter ones. Alright, I just wanted them out of the way. I'm gonna play Minecraft, but it's not gonna let me. So I'm just gonna play So I was gonna play Minecraft, but it's being stupid, not letting me, because I own it. Even with X logged in, so I'm assuming Game Pass is up.
I'm going up 100, 200, 300 next, baby. Let's go.
So
I mean, the desperation here is just
later I'm
real.
gonna play
What makes things
Fortnite with
even more
Logan,
laughably
since we're staying up
stupid
tonight.
is how much this point of his flopped. Because let's just put things into perspective here. Remember when Boogie2988 was tricked into promoting this pump and dump? Well, his coin did so much better than Jack's. And I mean, Jack's the guy who's allegedly pulling tens of thousands of viewers live every stream. But we'll get back into that later on. Because it hasn't even been 2 months since this IRL streamer destroyed his career by live streaming himself, crashing his McLaren because he was reading his chat while driving. Meanwhile, just minutes before that, he foreshadowed everything by saying, "Oh, I'm probably gonna crash."
I'm most likely going to crash this bar.
But that didn't stop him from reading the chat while driving as it was pouring rain. And as if things were bad enough from before, he injured his friend doing this, then showed absolutely zero regard for his well-being, and even had his friend film him being upset about crashing his McLaren so he could use this for clickbait. I mean, this was definitely one of those rare moments where people on the internet